Okay, back at it. RTBTH, what's up? What's up?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yo, feels good to be back, Tune. It's been a minute since we recorded. Of course, a whole bunch of bullshit has happened and a lot of good real life things too. So I'm definitely glad we're getting on the pod today to discuss some recent, life stuff and some very, very recent, like literally 24, I guess 48 hours now. This fool is probably still doing press conferences. That's how new some of this other news is. So I'm really excited to get into it.
Definitely got to hit the sports topics because we are originally a sports podcast. But we are doing Coronavirus Chronicles. This is Coronavirus Chronicles 7, and I think we're probably going to have a discussion with our third podcast mate, Ehi, who's not here, podcasting with us right now, about how many Chronicles are we going to do? I think it's just Chronicles at this point. And if it's not the Coronavirus Chronicles, I don't want to do it. But anyway, we're back for Coronavirus Chronicles number 7, and we have 3 podcasters, the regulars, Herschel and Tunde, and a guest. Who is our guest, Herschel?
Our guest is a very good friend of mine, a longtime friend I've known since my high school days. This is a super dope, well-informed in all topics, both professional and sports-wise. So super glad to have him on the podcast today. We could call him the football expert. He did play a little bit of football in China for a little bit. So, actually has some insights in China. The podcast, RTBT.
Yo, shout out.
China. Oh, he got the shirt on. Yeah. So this is my boy, Justin. What's good? Say what's up to the people.
What's going on? Yeah, I'm Justin, as Herschel mentioned. Yeah, we go way back. Even Tune, like we've met a couple of times over the years. Spent a lot of time together recently. So yeah, as Herschel mentioned, I'm happy to be here. Definitely looking to get in on the sports talk, contribute to the Coronavirus Chronicles. And as you mentioned, Shanghai Warriors, we happen to be representing coincidentally all day. Check that out. Happy New Year.
Day, every day.
Cool.
Yeah,
all right.
What's up, man?
Couple of housekeeping things first. Herschel, I'm disappointed in you. One of your groomsmigos, #groomsmigos, is already the football expert. So.
Touche. Okay, can't give up the position. My bad. I'm always trying
Herschel,
to give up these positions, man.
Damn it.
Trying to recycle them in.
But I already thought of this, and I know what it is. Justin,
Okay.
Welcome to the podcast. This is your first time coming on. Hopefully you'll be on many more times as the travel expert. So we did have some time to chat, and which is why I wanted to get you on the podcast. I was like, this dude has some great things to say. And we had some great conversations in Costa Rica, which we'll talk about very soon. And then I followed you on Instagram, and then you had a post that was like 30 countries, and by 30, or was it 100 countries or something? I don't know. But you are officially the travel expert, Justin. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's I guess long story short, I mean, I grew up in a I grew up in a household where like traveling wasn't really a thing. There wasn't a lot of disposable income. I was afforded an opportunity to travel through a scholarship after my sophomore year in college. Did a summer in Berlin, got hooked. That was my first country. That was summer of 2010. Now, I mean, I did set that goal. I wanted to do like 30 countries by 30. I think now I'm over 60. And, travel is just something I have always had a passion for since I discovered it. And I just look for any ways possible to get out and explore. I love being able to experience new cultures, try new things, being able to talk to other people about like how their life is. What is your perspective of like Americans? What is your perspective of me as a Black man? What are your initial perceptions? Anything I can do to sort of go out there and challenge any stereotypes that people may have, change the stereotypes of a Black American, of an American, anything like that. So I genuinely love those experiences, and that's just something that I always seek out. So,
Justin, man, thanks for telling us about that. And I mean, honestly, we just want people on the podcast to share their perspectives, tell us about them. And I mean, Herschel and I and Ehi have had a habit of trying to get people that are, probably very good at doing what they do and are invested in their careers or their sort of pastimes or their hobbies, and who basically will teach us. I mean, honestly, me and Herschel and Ehi, I mean, we kind of know a lot of things. That's why we do the podcast. But I mean, there's so many things more that we can learn. And that's what we want on the podcast, just people who would teach us some things. So shout out to the travel expert. Shout out to the first podcast. Shout out to the last place that we traveled to, which is Costa Rica. Tell us about it, Herschel.
Pura vida.
Yes, indeed. Yo, so it's crazy because this might not even be the last place that Justin has traveled to since then. But I will tell the audience members, we're in celebration mode still over here. I recently got married in Costa Rica. She was lit. And,
air horns coming.
Guys, yes, thank you. These two guys, as well as some other grooms migos, were able to hold it down for me. Keep your boy sane throughout the week before actually, doing the nuptials, the official ceremony and whatnot. But it was beautiful. From the groom's perspective, at least, nobody really cares about what I think most of the time. But from my perspective, almost everything went off pretty much without a hitch. One of our main goals was to make sure like our friends and family who, again, just like Justin was mentioning, may not have had a perspective of, traveling around to different places, get an opportunity like this. On top of that, everybody had already been in the house for at least a year and a half or so because of, COVID pretty much. So it was like a very powerful kind of reemergence for a lot of people to be able to come celebrate, not just us, but, we try to have, baked in opportunities for people to have their own fun, right? So I do want to get you guys' perspective, as, you came a little bit early, so you had a couple of extra days to just kind of fuck around. It wasn't so much like, oh, rush, gotta be here, gotta be there, do this, do that. Or was it that?
Bro, I ain't gonna lie to you, man. I have been thinking about that lobster from that restaurant on Wednesday, like pretty much since I had it, bro. That lobster was so fucking good, man. But, for the listeners who are not aware, I was the best man, and grateful to Herschel for inviting me to be his best man, and Taylor as well. And the wedding was incredibly beautiful. I've spoken about this, Herschel, and the bride and groom, like I saw you on in various capacities. So when you were getting married, obviously, the rehearsal, when you guys came down and sat at the table, and then you danced, and it was all just a lot of just great moments, and it was great to see y'all together. And yeah, that was, one of the biggest takeaways, aside from very beautiful Costa Rica and very delicious food. And just in general, like when we get together with our boys, over the years and whatnot and other celebrations, it's just amazing to be able to link up with people, a lot of people, and then you meet new people, like I met Justin in June for the bachelor party. And we got cool back then. And then I got to meet Justin again a little bit more. And I'm like, I feel like we are basically best friends. So, it's cool. Like when you can kind of extend your network through other people, like-minded people, which interestingly is exactly why we have the situation that we do have in the NFL. But we ain't going to talk about that right now.
Soon, though. Soon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me go and jump in just a little bit. First of all, location was excellent. Weather was great. Setting was beautiful. Even leading up to the rehearsal that we had the day before, and we were thinking man, it was hot. It was a steamer outside that day. And then the next day, right before the wedding, it was the weather it ended up being just perfect. It was slightly cooled off a little bit. It was kind of a little overcast, but it just blocked out the sun just a little bit. Everything worked out really, really beautifully. And then the rain held out and everything. That was all awesome. But from the welcome dinner and then all of the other little events that we had was great. The ATVing was super dope. Just being able to get out and see some of the countryside was super beautiful. We definitely had a great time. The resort was incredible, situated right there on the beach. Great company that we had. So you couldn't go wrong.
Indeed, the Grooms Migos was definitely lit. The resort was lit. It was very beautiful. I was fortunate to get a massage on the beach, which was quite fantastic, especially after a lot of PhD priorities that I'm sure I cried to you guys about a lot during our time together. And then we went ATVing on an ATV tour, and with Ahi and a couple other grooms Migos, and that was fantastic. I actually don't think I told you this story, Herschel, but Justin was there. But so basically, when you go on the ATV tour, the guide, he's like telling you to pretty much stay in a line, and so he eventually like picks up the speed. But for the most part, and everyone can follow him, but for the most part, I mean, it's kind of like a pretty breezy tour, So we got into some open space, and I just kind of, so I just zoomed it, man. Those ATVs go fast, and I was just like, and the next thing you know, our beloved podcast co-host Ehi, the instigator, aka the investigator, he sees me pulling up to the side of him, and he just zooms. He's just like, all right, I see Tunde doing his thing. I'm about to zoom too. So we go on maybe a 75-yard race or whatever. And then dude stops the whole fucking group. He comes back and he's like, what did I say? What did I say? And he kind of, gets into us for a little bit. I mean, he was cool. He was chill. He definitely eased up. But for a split second, man, I definitely had to just lose it for a second and just zoom in the ATV. But it was cool, man. It was cool.
Yeah. Yo, Popeye definitely came after you guys.
Oh yeah, his name was Popeye. I didn't tell you about that already, Herschel, right? Because I don't think we really even linked up the last day.
No, but you're like the third person to tell me a different ATV story, and all of them have been like hella reckless. One of the bridesmaids was like, yeah, I almost flipped that bitch and broke my leg. Somebody else ran into the back of another ATV. Like it sounds like y'all were really hell on wheels. So he probably did need to get in y'all ass because
yeah.
Jordan, I'm glad everybody came back.
Dude, Jordan actually went off course. And I saw it because we stopped. I don't know what happened. I guess we stopped like the whole convoy or whatever. And our guy was like walking back and he saw me. I was like kind of swerving. He was like, okay. He gave me a thumbs up. Next thing you know, Jordan, I look around, I turn around, Jordan, he's like running into or driving into a tree. And I was like, for a split second nervous because I wasn't like sure if a branch was going to like impale him or some shit. And it was like a bushy tree area.
That's not funny, sorry.
But he was good.
Bruh,
he was
good. Yo, it's the rainforest out there. It's wild out there. Not even just rainforest. It's like shit out there. So I'm sure. Did y'all have to sign some waivers and stuff? Because some of these people I know were like just coming up off the beach, like, oh yeah, we have tours and stuff. So I don't know how legit y'all set anything up. I mean, I'm glad again everything was good, but I don't know if y'all saw the hospital when we drove in, but I wouldn't want to be stuck there, whether it's COVID or any other reason. So, goddamn.
Yeah, we all made it out and had a great time just across all the festivities. But definitely some things, had to be discerning, with all of the sort of, with going ATV and all the alcohol available. Definitely had to be on your toes and not get too stupid. You know what I'm saying? I was definitely starting to get a little lit on wedding night before the best man speech. And I was doing my thing until I got actually, was it Taylor or you that called me over to the table? I don't know. But then y'all was like, basically, you said some things and struck me in my soul. And I was like, all right, I got to turn up. I got to chill out for a second. Which makes a lot of sense because honestly, like, I want to say like maybe two people before the wedding who have nothing to do with the wedding, but I just told them about what was going to happen. They were like, oh, are you doing a best man speech? I was like, of course. They're like, don't do a drunk one. Don't do a drunk one. I'm like, I didn't intend on doing. Is it like a commonality or something?
Yes, man. Yes. When people lose control, they get too excited. The liquor is flowing, and then they don't realize, like, oh, I'm drinking now, but 2 hours later, I got to talk in front of people, and it's already difficult to talk in front of people for most people. You obviously are highly educated, a lot of practice speaking in front of crowds or whatever. But I've seen firsthand multiple best men's, I don't know. And
best mains.
Yeah, best mains and maid and matrons of honor fucking up a speech because they just got too excited. They were waiting too long for whatever, and then it just got the best of them. But nah, you did a great job, man. I really appreciated it. The reception as a whole was just super lit. I actually I can remember everything from wedding day, but the day before when we had a welcome dinner on the beach and shit, and I was on the mic in ones and twos, I definitely can't remember what the fuck happened in the second half of that. particular event. I know I took some shots with some of the employees and whatnot, so that was dope. But I wasn't the only one that had to be carried up out of there. I'll just say it like that. But yo, so obviously we had great experiences, on this particular excursion. But this kind of leads into with the potential accidents on ATVs. And spoiler alert, some people got COVID. Several people got COVID. A lot of people may or may not have contracted COVID between the time they tested negative at the resort and when we finally got back home. So obviously we had COVID or whatever, or had an outbreak of COVID or whatever. But I'm interested particularly in your opinion on this, Justin, when let's say you're on a travel experience, everything is going great, but you travel so much. Every single experience isn't always going to be super awesome or whatever. You're going to run into some turmoil. You're going to have to overcome some shit. So can you speak to any bad travel situations where it was oh shit, I need to pull all my faculties together. It's no longer just a party and I'm drunk doing whatever, or even a business trip or whatever. Have you had any experiences like that?
During COVID?
Anytime, but I mean, particularly during COVID, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the most complicated part is the COVID testing, because you can be out and you can be masked up the entire time and somehow you could still contract COVID. You never know. Maybe you brushed up against it at some point. At some point, it got into your system. That's something that you kind of always have to be a little weary of. And then knowing the timelines when you have to get tested to get back to the US, because say, for instance, I had a flight that was coming back to the US after Costa Rica. A few weeks later, I was in Colombia and I was coming back on December 31st. Biden had
a few weeks later. Wait a minute. Let's not gloss over. Just so in case anybody was trying to check on his travel credentials. So a few weeks after you were just in Costa Rica, you were in Colombia. Could you tell us where you were the week before Costa Rica?
I was in Jamaica. Anyway, Planes fly every day, Herschel.
That's true.
Planes fly every day.
That's technically okay. True.
But I mean, I think it was December 8th, or it was somewhere beginning of December. The Biden administration changed the rule where you needed to have shown a proof of negative COVID test within 24 hours of travel, taken within 24 hours of travel. And so when my flight got canceled, it seemed it's not that big of a deal. Flight gets canceled. It's New Year's Eve. You got to find last minute place to stay, which is also kind of a headache, especially if you're in a pretty popular area. Because I was in Medellin and I was in a central area. So it was I had to scramble to find another place. But then on top of that, I had to go to the hospital to get a COVID test because it was the only place open in town that was still doing COVID testing on New Year's Eve. So, it's kind of a scramble. And I'm trying to go to places and talk to people using Google Translate. And so things like that, you definitely have to always account for now if you're traveling in this COVID era that we're in. I mean, it seems like some of those restrictions are going to be released. Europe has basically said that they're going to treat COVID as no longer a threat to society and just kind of open things up. But you just traveling throughout COVID, you've always had to consider this. I've traveled a lot for work. Fortunately, I've never tested positive during work travel. The only time I did test positive for COVID, but I was at home. I got it somewhere in Atlanta. I didn't have anywhere to be. So, I just kind of stayed at home and quarantined and it's been fine. I've never tested positive since then. Even among all my travels, but I always have to keep in mind, what are the restrictions on where I'm going? There have been places where, I had a layover and it was the layovers for where I might have tried to extend it and do 24 or 48 hours or something. Now you have to also think about, how long is the validity period of the COVID test that you had? Because if you got it in the US and you were flying to some place in West Africa and you're thinking about doing a day or something layover, the country that you're finally entering into, are they going to accept that? Is your validity period going to change? I remember when I was going to Kenya, their restriction was you had to have taken the test and entered Kenya within 96 hours. And it was explicitly saying 96 hours. So basically you have a 4-day window from the time you take the test, 2 days to get the results back, 1 day to get in Kenya. and it's already going to take you from Atlanta at least 20 hours of travel to get there. So I think when I entered Kenya, it was like with 5 hours to spare or something, like, and I had to also have this test result before I could get on the plane in Atlanta. So it was just like a lot of, hey, maybe I'm not going to be able to like take this flight. So you just always have to sort of consider that, and like just this additional hurdle that you have to go through in traveling with COVID. Now I'm also here a huge proponent of like getting tested, know your status, make sure that you're aware of if you're not just aimlessly out here spreading the virus. Do your best to protect yourself, your loved ones, and everyone around you. Like, I think that it's incumbent upon us to do that at the very least. But this is just one of the things that you have to consider.
Yeah, that's definitely very real. Especially with the changing mandates and shifting shit like that. I can't imagine like being in the air or already like in transit somewhere, and then the rules have changed on you, and now you are stuck in between, where you were going and where you want to be. So, yeah, definitely great insight. It's Toon. You actually had this comment that basically everybody has a date with COVID. So it's also interesting to hear that Europe. I saw that Denmark. I didn't know that it was the entire continent, I guess, of Europe that had kind of relinquished their COVID restrictions and are no longer treating it as a quote unquote threat to society. Which, I mean, I don't know how I feel about that yet. I haven't thought about it enough. I'm gonna just be real.
I just got to say, the investigator said it way before I did, and on Coronavirus Chronicles, like number 5 or some shit, he said that basically everyone is gonna get a mandated vaccine, whether it's through the actual vaccine or infection, and that's what's happening. And yeah, I mean, the COVID sort of situation, to me, I don't know. It doesn't really. I think that that we're delayed in sort of moving on to this sort of endemic phase, I guess. And I'm not a epidemiologist or a vaccinologist or a virologist, so everything I say is just some bullshit that I read somewhere.
Or heard from the other co-hosts who are epidemiologists and virologists. What the? But
that's true. Okay. That's true. You are legit like a epidemiologist and soon to be PhD holding epidemiologist. So, but yeah, I mean, I think honestly, ever since I got COVID, I've been kind of on like moving on with my life. I'm still. Honestly, I'm probably not actually adhering to the COVID policies too well anymore. But, frankly, COVID kind of sucked, but I have a little bit more peace in life. I can't even lie to you. I feel a little bit more peaceful. I think at one point I knew that I felt that I probably would be able to handle COVID after getting vaccinated, and just kind of understanding, how dangerous it is to certain groups of people. Thankfully, I thank dark matter, because I don't believe in God, that I am one of those people who probably could handle it. I do believe in dark matter, though. Anyway, I just feel like, looking back, man, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of new things coming out that are kind of bothering the crap out of me. I think Johns Hopkins released a study basically saying that there was no much more added effect of lockdowns than what would have been expected without them. And I didn't read the study in detail, just read an article on it, and there's more information coming out. And looking back, I'm just like, I feel like we treated COVID a little bit more, with too much, I guess, authoritarianism in some sense, than we needed to. Yeah, anyway, I rambled there for a little bit, but I feel like the Chronicles are coming to an end. That's basically the sum of what I'm saying.
I feel like this is basically summed up best in the Rick Ross lyric in Outlaws, where he says, people thinking it's pandemic when it's really life. Like, you got to move on. Honestly, we are in phases where, like, you should always kind of be hoping to progress within your life or whatever. But like, we're 2 years removed from, almost 2 years removed from March 2020. It was a totally different world then. And if you haven't, progressed in any way, or, I know it's really tough like that for a lot of communities and people COVID has kind of forced people to take like backward steps. But I mean, we're at a point where you can't be hyperbolic really about, whether it's just your health. You just can't be hyperbolic about it. You have to acknowledge that either you're taking it into your own hands, you're accepting whatever risk, which is fine, or you're going to be active about it and either get tested or get vaccinated or do whatever. And both are fine. I mean, people make weird decisions about all kind of shit all day, every day. So I'm not necessarily here to tell people what to do this time. We've probably had other Coronavirus Chronicles where we did, kind of push the issue of like, all right, we should get this or you should do that or whatever. But I mean, everybody's going to get it. So you can either get over it or get going. So.
Yeah, Herschel, I got
That's from the epidemiologist himself.
So, it's legit. You heard it here first. Nah, fuck that. I'm quoting you, bro.
All right, you can quote me.
Yeah, I tell everyone I got a friend that works at a CDC. Believe that.
So
I don't
like
sure
when
what
Linsky sent out the comment, he was right there with her. So
no, man. Yo, she sent some shit today that I was like, yo, I kind of don't fuck with this. So today, for the listeners and everything, hopefully this comes out within the month, but it is Black History Month right now, right? I know shots fired.
Oh, happy Black History Month, fellas.
Yeah, exactly. My kings was good. But basically, this lady sends out an email that's like super PC and whatnot about like Black History Month and da-da-da-da. But
you talking about Walensky?
Yeah, I'm talking about Rochelle Walensky, yes.
MGH alumni, by the way, BT Dubs.
Yes, appointee by Joe Biden, da-da-da-da-da. Nice, friendly lady. She uses the words African-American throughout the whole thing. And I'm like, man, were you afraid? Like, was this a PR thing? Were you afraid? You were afraid to put Black all through this statement because you are talking this is a constant argument and just general debate, not necessarily an argument within the Black community, within the Black diaspora of what African American versus Black means. But yeah, it was a weird email to kind of receive. And I do always, having worked with the CDC now, I got to recognize like, all right, these are political figures. This person was appointed here or there, or, yes, they might be good scientists and, generally could do their job, but there are definitely directives coming from on high. So it is what it is.
Yeah, Herschel, I meant to say this to you earlier, but I mean, first of all, that Rick Ross quote is legit as fuck, man. That's some real shit right there. And I agree. And I think psychologists sort of describe how humans adapt. I think a lot of what we do psychologically has to do with our ability to adapt to different situations and in bad situations too, like talking about certain mental illnesses, how some people present with mental illnesses. It's oftentimes an adaptation to earlier situations, scenarios, environments, Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I was a bit frustrated with earlier, but, I was fine with all the COVID stuff. Now I'm very frustrated with shit, it's like we are not adapting. We are just sort of fighting COVID. We're not adapting to life with COVID, although it seems like we're turning a bit. Just real quick, one comment before another comment. Man, ain't podcasted in a minute. Got a lot of shit to say. Another thing that bothers me is like, we have sort of imposed a lot of damage to people who are less powerful in our society. People who work in sort of service industries, restaurant workers or others. I mean, it varies, but people have to wear masks. They have to check vaccine cards and shit. And the job is not the same as it was in 2019. But society doesn't exactly sort of prioritize these jobs and the people who own these jobs or who work these jobs. Children, I don't have kids, so I could probably be very limited in what I'm saying here. But I mean, children are wearing masks nonstop. Everywhere they go is shove a mask on their face, And again, there's information, there's research that's sort of, perhaps it's not like fully settled, but there's enough convincing evidence to say that we don't necessarily have to wear masks everywhere or, being boosted for some people isn't going to really add any value to their ability to deal with COVID. I'm not going to I don't know the science too well. Herschel, if you want to drop some knowledge, please do. But, there's a pretty healthy debate about how much we need to sort of keep some of these 2020 COVID policies. One more thing, Herschel, I do got to give it up to you. Like you said, people think it's a pandemic when it's really life. Man, I appreciate you pushing with the wedding, and I guess it was 2021, so you didn't really have to cancel or just other things in general. But I did get this sense from you that like we're doing this wedding, like from all the updates and everything. And I was always gonna go. Like I said, I've kind of been over this COVID shit for a minute, and I've been willing to take the risks, whether it's the bachelor party or Costa Rica. But I was like, I definitely have respect for y'all for doing the wedding. And the thing is, the thing that we would have tried to avoid by not going to the wedding, it happened, and we survived, and it's all good. And COVID is now behind us. That's it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, dude, you made a ton of good points, so I'm glad you kept talking. But yeah, that was definitely the motive of like, yo, low key, because it would always be like a question: do we get the health insurance package for travel to Costa Rica? Do we get the wedding insurance? All da 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 da. We got some of the packages and whatnot. I'm not going to tell you which, but we didn't get all of the insurance. But we were definitely of the mindset, even before Delta variant was done in the summer of 2021, we were like, yo, we going on this trip. Like, ain't no way. We've already promised too much to all these people. People have been inside. Like, we've known too many people who have gotten COVID and gotten over it. But that comment about society and governance really not adapting is just so on point. It really reminds me this war on COVID. It makes me think immediately to a war on drugs, where again we saw for a long time all these policies that weren't necessarily doing anything to improve outcomes or improve the lives of American citizens or whatever. It was more a hindrance. It was more bureaucracy, red tape, more arrests, more toxicity of disparate communities. Being minorities and low income communities. Same thing happening with COVID. So you made some great points there. But I do think this kind of is a great transition into our next topic of sports and how so many sports have been skating, particularly the one NFL where they were just having a ton of COVID cases throughout the season and whatnot. Playoffs hit. You ain't heard shit. Not a single player I've heard about being out or down, and maybe they all got it in December and now they're good or whatever. But really, are we? Is that what we're thinking? Because it definitely this goes back again to the travel testing comments and stuff like that. We need to all adapt our systems now. Just because the NFL has skated and is not doing what they said they would do, and it happens to be what I've been purporting as like, oh, moving on, and that's a positive adaptation. Nah, that's you gotta set rules and then adhere to whatever rules you set, or just be flexible. You can't really have it both ways, and they're basically trying to have it both ways. But hopefully that can kick us off into the rest of our sports comments. I know we have a bunch of other stuff on the list too, but I had to get that out there.
Indeed. Justin, thoughts?
I agree. I mean, I think overall, like, COVID it's been something that has been looming over us for quite some time. And even going back to your original comment, like we weren't really finding ways of like living with this as like the new norm. We've just constantly been trying to make, I don't want to use the word excuses, but we've been trying to use it as like a reason why, oh, we need to shut this down. We need to stop doing this because we just don't know the answer. And it's like, we're just kind of like making things up. And maybe you can make the argument that, oh, well, we were trying to like slow the spread for the sake of hospital overcrowding and stuff like that and infrastructure issues. But then at the end of the day, like every country that has aggressively shut down much more than us, they still have issues with COVID. Because at some point, tourism or like even business travel comes back. Like say, for instance, Bali, they had this thing where in order to enter Bali, you had to first quarantine for 5 days and test negatively consistently in Jakarta in a hotel that you paid for. And then you'd be free to go to Bali. They still have COVID outbreaks in Bali. So it's like, you did all that for what? You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's all for naught. Maybe it did contribute to slowing the spread. Maybe it did contribute to like easing the burden on the hospitals and infrastructure. But at the same time, just understanding that this is something that we are going to have to live with, similar to what you might say is the flu, a more aggressive flu or something. I think it's important for us to just sort of come to terms with it, because unless you could literally stop everybody from moving, including essential workers, and make everybody quarantine and nobody happen to have long COVID or like residual effects that just don't seem to go away, there's no way that you could ever get away with this. Like COVID will always be, and I guess you can call it. Are we officially calling it endemic? Is it too soon to say that? I'm not a
I don't know.
science person, but
it's technically an endemic, but I think that is like I mean, with Europe making a distinction and being like it's not a threat, it kind of that kind of has set the record. But I don't know if like who has said that. It does come down from the World Health Organization, the pandemic distinction, any of the distinctions. So, and you'd be surprised, like this is not the first pandemic.
And I mean, to be fair, like we and other countries have said this in the past. We're like, oh, COVID's behind us. And then as soon as we like aggressively opened up, we were like, oh, wait, this new aggressive variant comes back. It's like COVID has a mind of its own. It's like, oh, you think I'm playing? Okay. All right. I'm coming back with the remix, another one. And then, but I mean, it seems like at least what I've read, the most recent variants haven't been as aggressive. But you'll still see cases where like people are dying from like those variants. So, at some point it's up to you to assess your own risk and your own risk tolerance as to, is this something that you have the appetite for or not? Yeah, I don't have the answers, man. Just say mask up, protect yourself, and do your
book
best
a mask.
to enjoy your life.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna stop. Wear your masks.
Listen, man,
listeners.
Fauci knows just as much as Roger Goodell and Adam Silver and all these other dudes that are in control of different groups of people. Like, we just out here, we're all just out here learning and doing the best we can. All the information is 6 months old by the time we could do anything with it anyway. So, but yeah, all right. So really briefly, because I want to get into some of these super flaming hot topics that we got, but it is the week or 2 weeks, I guess, before the Super Bowl. I got to get y'all's quick Super Bowl predictions, and then we can move on to like the real meat and potatoes. Justin?
I'm gonna keep it short. I like the Rams. I like the Rams playing at home, but I like Joey B more. I don't know. It seems like nobody can take this kid down. I know it sounds crazy. I'm gonna take
you heard it here first.
24. I'm gonna take them to hurt them at home, in SoFi Stadium. I'm gonna take the Bengals. The comeback,
like them LSU boys. Ed Orgeron, go Tigers! Oh yeah,
go Tigers!
There you go.
That would be quite a Super Bowl. Look, y'all can go listen to the podcast. R2BGH goes back to Cali. Had a couple Cali guests on the podcast, and I showed my love for the Rams because they're so Hollywood. I mean, you got Odell Beckham Jr., you got Matt Stafford, you got Von Miller, you got Sean McVay. It's just too good. It's too good. It's just perfect entertainment. All right, and that's what I want to see. I want to be entertained. I mean, they're a good team too. I'm going with the Rams. I mean, the Bengals, we'll see. But it is quite a miraculous playoff run they've had. I shouldn't say miraculous because they're a decent team, and I guess Joe Burrow is like the truth. I don't know. I haven't really even followed like too much football this year, except for the Rams, of course. And
Now we do need to let the listeners know that you did come in. I think, was it last place? Were you in last place in the league this season?
Oh my God, Herschel! Wow, I'm not going to comment. I'm not going to comment on that because people who don't make the playoffs can't really comment on where other people. Anyway, I'm not going to finish that conversation. Herschel,
I did miss the playoffs. That was me. You didn't come in last. I'm just playing. But I think I'm going to go with the Rams as well. I don't know what's going on. I like them LSU boys, but I think that there's just too much experience. Shout out Sean McVay, Marist High School's own. So just around the corner from where me and Justin went to school and stuff. But
he coached there? or he went there.
He played there.
He played there.
Oh,
He played there.
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, he might have coached there too. You know, with these systems, he probably got bumped up, which is one of the later topics. These coaching scandals. Can't wait to get into, but we got other shit to get into first, baby. Yo, the next thing that we've really been kind of, ready to bite into is that man Dana White power and his tyranny over the UFC. Now, obviously, Tunde and I, we've discussed a lot where, I am the fantasy commissioner. And I do rule with an iron fist. So I understand what it means to be a tyrant, to come out here, to produce, a powerful TV product. Sometimes you just got to crack a few skulls. Sometimes you got to, do what you got to do. I will say, though, my man Dana White, you're going too far. I understand that all these dudes that are, and this, for listeners, this is basically a breakdown in Dana White having all of his fighters who are within the UFC, its own league and organization, each fighter essentially being an individual unit rather than like a team sport like MLB or NBA or whatever, where they're also able to unionize. He has all of these fighters under contract, and these contracts are very skewed in his favor, where he's got now after UFC started out as like this behind the scenes, back alley fighting type shit. Not really, but like they were trying to build a sport. And then people realized, oh, this shit is dope to watch. We want to watch this on Friday, Saturday night, whenever. ESPN realizes, a decade or two down the road, there's a lot of value in this. We can charge people for it. We can create our own kind of streaming platform. Basically the perfect storm of everything that's happened with the internet and, people cutting the cord and shit like that. And now it leaves Dana White in this power position where he's like, yo, I'm not budging. I got y'all under contract. I'm the only game in town, low key. There is, of course, Bellator and other like mixed martial arts competitions you could be a part of, but he has sold, the true, basically what the NFL would be. So all of the fighters, particularly Francis Ngannou, the heavyweight champion right now, are all basically behind the eight ball. They can't get these paychecks that they really deserve based on the numbers that the fights are bringing in. And then, to juxtapose that, you've got your boy Jake Paul and his brother Logan. Yeah, Logan Paul fighting, nonsense and basketball players and rappers and fucking, personalities, and then washed up now fighters from UFC who are like, 40, 50 years old, whoever, whatever, so that they can get contracts or so that they can get paydays. And it's just like a super bad look, but I'm not sure what we can do to get Dana White to change besides just shaming this fool, because he's got all the cards. They signed contracts. That's where like I'm like, well, the tyrant kind of did it. But again, his fighters, just like the NFL, are often coming from places where it's like, yo, we don't have any other options. We don't have any kind of financial education to understand like what we were signing our lives away to. That man Francis Ngannou, I was informed by one of our boys, AJ. Shout out to AJ and Erica that came to the wedding. They just watched the fight with the newlyweds this past weekend, where this dude, Francis Ngannou, his story is coming up from the mines in Cameroon. Like he was digging for blood diamonds, like that Cameroon right there. And he is now the heavyweight champion of UFC in the world. And he's always, because of the sport and how, again, he's contractually obligated to defend his title and continue fighting and just essentially put on events throughout the year without ever getting an opportunity to renegotiate now that he is the main attraction. Nobody else is paying $100 or whatever the pay-per-view is to see Joe Schmo fight other Joe Schmo, unless I guess it's Jake Paul and he can build an event around it. So aside from everybody breaking their contract, I don't know what we do.
Yeah. Well, just to sort of give a little context for non-MMA fans, and even myself, I'm probably still very middle of the pack in terms of my fandom, but that probably, I probably watched a lot more than other people, than most people. But yeah, I mean, basically right now, Francis Ngannou, Cameroonian, one of 3 African champions right now in the UFC, is having some interesting contract sort of fluctuation. I mean, there's no like contract dispute. Like he's not sort of challenging the contract. He's still meeting all his obligations, but I've watched interviews, the sort of primary issue is that he feels the UFC doesn't really negotiate in good faith, and they have outsized power in the sort of contract issues. And long story short, this has been sort of percolating in the industry for a while, and it, sort of amounts to like labor issues. Honestly, Herschel, I feel you, man, as far as being tyrannical when you're in a commissioner oriented role, and especially with the UFC, because you have to invest a lot in fighters, and fighters don't necessarily like show up in terms of fighting and then being stars. I mean, these guys get into, trouble with the law and stuff, and I mean, all sports and sports have people like that. But then there's issues with like cutting weight, PEDs. People testing positive. John Jones tested positive. I think it was UFC 200, like a huge event. And Brock Lesnar was making his like re-debut at UFC 200. And John Jones tested positive like right before the fight. By the way, definitely do your Googles. It might not have been UFC 200, but I'm pretty sure it was. Anything that's said on this podcast, do your Googles, B. We're not here to like freaking educate the masses. Actually, we are. Sometimes we are. Anyway, but yeah, and so I don't really know the contract stuff too well, and to me it does feel like it's outsized on the part of the UFC. But the one thing that I just like struggle with is you're talking about the UFC heavyweight. The heavyweight champion of the world has clout. Historically has clout, not just fighting clout. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Muhammad Ali is the perfect case example. There's like a sort of cultural pull that they have that's like on par with like political pull and, just cultural pull. And they are subjugating him, and, they're not paying him what a heavyweight fighter should be. And I mean, there have been other heavyweight fighters in the UFC, but, I don't know, or dominant heavyweight fighters, heavyweight champions, I should say. The thing about Ngannou is that, first of all, his story is unbelievable and exactly what people do in MMA. They overcome challenges and ascend from difficult circumstances, despair. But the other factor is like a lot of people pretty much said as soon as he won the belt that he was the most dominant, or at least the scariest heavyweight of all time. Like, this is a different heavyweight dude because he does it with knockouts. He knocks people out. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, Herschel, you kind of already touched on one of the major issues is that there's really not much that can be done, unless people really legitimately want to unionize and strike. But, you got people lower on the UFC rankings and who are just trying to make a come up, just trying to make their little couple Ks and move on. And they're not going to stop working, because the heavyweight champion of the world is not satisfied with 600K. And I don't think it's only money for him. He also wants to box. So that's another thing. These fighters cannot do pretty much any other sporting activity for, professionally when they're on contracting. Yeah. Anyway, power dynamics are real.
Yeah. But even beyond that, the contracts are super fucked up in that, like, they were also signed on with UFC and were like outfitted by Reebok and whatnot, but then they were unable to acquire any other like sponsorships from other companies. So like it's again limiting their earning power. Those are some of the disputes that are going on. And I mean, you make a good point. Yeah. It's going to be really difficult to get the lower end fighters to kind of, band together to get behind some kind of cause. But that's the only way that they really are going to get ahead. Because either way, if you are a lowly fighter hoping to aspire to one day be, some, headliner or whatever, you are going to be affected by whatever contract dispute you decided to sit out on. It's directly going to affect your pockets. It's how, generally when they do have lockouts, they're in a lockout for baseball right now. They're trying to get one for football, but I mean, the football union is not that strong in comparison to the baseball union. So they're going to always kind of be losing fights. I would, anticipate the same thing kind of happening here. But I think one of the biggest things that, we might see this is my long-term hot take projection. These same issues where we're seeing, the NFL, and we're going to get into it way more, the NFL kind of just showing their racist card and not allowing black people into management positions and real, financial wealth and opportunities to have power and control. We're going to see that same kind of, breakdown here in the UFC in a few years, where like somebody's going to be leaking text messages of how like, oh man, well, this fight was fixed, or yeah, we actually didn't want you to be in there, or we had, some other setup because you don't make the money that, you're not the draw that we need you to be. My prediction would be that eventually this will become professional wrestling. That's my hot take.
God damn.
Dana,
that is quite a hot take, but I actually agree with that a lot. Justin?
Honestly, I hadn't thought about that, but the way you described it and the way it seems like things are heading, I could see that as conceivable, that it would become basically like the next brand of like professional wrestling. Because I agree. I think I understand from a business perspective too, like some of the points you touched on, like, oh, you have to invest X amount in fighters. I mean, in reality, like 95+% of the guys that go this route will never actually earn any, decent money. They'll probably put more wear and tear on their body and actually spend a lot of time in recovery, spending time away from their family and not really making that big break. But for those 5% of guys that do, like, they're the ones that are like really generating the revenue for the sport. And like, sure, you could say what Dana White has been able to do was like sort of like monopolize on this brand. He's like, this is his thing. This was sort of something he got in on really early. And he strategically put them in these contracts that like really only benefit him, restricting the amount of sponsorships that they could have. So it's like, hey, that's less money out of the sponsorship's pocket, but also it's like fewer avenues for it to go to. So it's like, hey, send that money directly to UFC instead of paying these multiple athletes on the side, which is also going to cost them more. So like it for them, I would say for a sponsor and for UFC, it works out better. It's like, hey, you're paying one person versus like 50. But then at the same time, it's unfortunate that it puts those guys in a position where they are fighting and putting their lives on the line, but they're being disproportionately compensated for, the amount of revenue that they're actually able to generate for the business. It's unfortunate. And then I agree with you on like from the strike perspective, because again, the vast majority of those guys, same thing when we talk about like, football lockouts and stuff like that. Not everybody's making $10 million a year. And just because they might have made $300,000 or $400,000 a year doesn't mean that they were wise with their money. So like, you just have to always consider that you don't know each individual person's situation. A lot of those guys that make it up, they got a lot of mouths to feed. There's a lot of people that they, had to bring with them. So like the idea of saying like, oh, I'll strike. In principle, I could support you. I could want to take a knee during the national anthem. But then if Jerry Jones tells me I'm going to be cut tomorrow, and it's like, well, I gotta take care of my moms, my cousins, my family, my brothers and sisters. There's a lot of stuff that you also have to consider in each person's, individual scenario that they have going on. So I agree. Ultimately, I think that while I do not like the culture vultures that are Jake and Logan Paul, at least the one piece that I was objectively listening to is how he's trying to openly combat Dana White about like his practices. He's basically showing, he's like, look, I'm an amateur boxer and I'm out here. I think Tyron Woodley threw that fight, but I'm out here, fighting some of your older talent, and I'm actually making like a ton of money. I can show you the art of marketing, and I can show this to everyone, including like some of your star players. If I can get them to see that and see that value in themselves, he could even, have his own promotional branding business behind it, like Mayweather. What is it, like Mayweather box, whatever it is. He could have his own sort of product like that. He even mentioned like acquiring that promotions business so that he could even do the same thing. So, I think that it's inevitable. The competition will come. I think that the UFC's days, like with that sort of grip that they have, is numbered, because they also know that while it's exciting as mixed martial arts, they're more of like jack of all trades, but master of none. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to go out and beat a wrestler in the Olympics. They're not going to stand toe to toe and beat a boxer in the ring. So at the same time, I think they just need to sort of acknowledge that. But I think anything that you can do, if there's a market for it, to get these guys that are actually putting their body on the line, a better degree of compensation, I think it's worth it. And I think the competition inevitably will come. And I think the fact that what the Paul brothers are doing, just sort of like cracking at that, is going to only open the floodgates. It's only going to bring more competition. And I think that this will, in turn, become something that is either more viable for the athletes or just flat out professional wrestling and call it what it is.
Yeah, definitely agree there. And it's always so weird because with sports, and this is probably in everywhere, a human behavior, but we always kind of, align moralities and values with whatever sports are important. It happens in other countries, like you as a well-traveled person, Justin, can, I'm sure, speak to this, but the values that we put in these particular things definitely are, microcosms of the society we live in. We hear that all the time. But one of the things that I do think is very interesting throughout damn near all sports is those people that are in charge would rather change the rules to make things more entertaining rather than more fair or unbiased or whatever. They are always out to get, more eyeballs. And obviously we're hearing about it with, in a bunch of different ways. We're hearing about people, owners trying to pay for tanking and all kinds of shit like that. But even, whatever rules to protect quarterbacks or, just keep offenses going on the field, or have, in particular for football, having defenders not be able to defend as well because they can't hand check or can't do this or that, or, moving the 3-point line or anything in any sport. Like they're always looking for how to maximize the drama rather than
adding an extra game,
the actual competition. Yeah. Adding an extra game. These dudes are already tired and catching COVID and shit, but y'all definitely still playing these games. So, I mean, hey, but yeah, that was definitely a great insight. If we don't have other thoughts on this UFC dispute, we're moving on pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, real
thing.
quick about the UFC. I mean, yeah, like I said, that was a pretty flaming hot take, but honestly, it makes a lot of sense because, I mean, they've already started kind of waiting in that area, which is that BMF belt, which I just find just. And then Kamaru Usman, like, freaking, he actually won the first fight by decision and then stole Jorge Masvidal's life with that knockout. I think y'all know which one I'm talking about. And then he became the BMF. Like, the BMF is always the champion. So why did y'all, so it's very, WWE sort of, like, scripted, although I think every fight that happens. And, I don't know the history too well, but I do think every fight is legitimate. Fighters are trying to go out there and win. The industry behind it, though, is seeming like it's starting to get a little, entertaining, scripty, And the one time that they sort of do a co-promotion with Mayweather, it's like this weird, cross boxing MMA thing that everyone knew Mayweather was going to win. So, Justin, I hope you're right that the competition comes, like legitimate MMA competition in terms of the other organizations, like competition in the industry, but also fighting competition. I hope that maintains because there's some good fighters. As I said, 3 champions right now are from Africa, 2 are from Nigeria. So it's great to see these people, fighting and being celebrities. Israel Adesanya got that Puma deal, like this shit. I love it. I enjoy UFC and MMA. But Dana White's been pretty tyrannical. All right. Dana White power, it. So I'll go ahead and I got to talk about some mental health real quick. I'll try to keep it short before we get into the meat of this podcast. So Antonio Brown has basically rejected the mental health, label, which I find hilarious because I have had I've had thoughts about celebrities and discussions about mental health and how they talk about mental health, and which I'll describe in a bit. But yeah, I mean, so basically the situation with AB happened. We don't have to get into that. Do your Googles, B. And he had a interview with Bryant Gumbel on HBO Real Sports. Fantastic show, by the way. And he says, "Nah, I ain't got a mental health issue." And when that situation happened with the shirt off, everyone was like, I hope Antonio Brown gets help he needs. I thought it was so hilarious. Everybody became like a mental health expert when that happened. And I'm not trying to sound like, like an asshole mental health guy or whatever. But, I mean, it's so easy for everyone to say, go get get therapy. And I can assure you getting therapy is not easy. And doing therapy and maintaining therapy is not easy, emotionally, mentally. But then he rejects it. He's like, I don't got a mental health problem. So what are we supposed to do now? He's just an asshole. Like, I find that to be so hilarious. Yeah, so just had to touch on that, or just sort of briefly call attention to that.
Yeah, definitely. I'll add a couple of comments. I didn't actually watch the Brian Gumbel one, but I heard a comparison to the Brandon Marshall interview that he did. Brandon Marshall being the ex NFL wide receiver, who's similar to Antonio Brown, was also very boisterous during his career. He would speak out a lot. He was on a bunch of different teams. He would definitely trash his quarterback if they were not playing well, or trash the coaching staffs, whatever, if things were not going well. But he was also very vocal when they were winning. But this guy has, started his own platform, as many athletes have done, and got a chance to speak with AB. And it was very similar. It was more yelling. It was more nonsense and whatnot. But Brandon Marshall was able to speak to like, yo, I have been where you have been. I've been trying to play to get incentives, and had instances where a team tried to, placate me as being mentally unstable so that they could get whatever outcome they wanted to get out of the situation, whether it's getting rid of my contract or, what have you. And he was just trying to explain that the way AB had gone about it was obviously the completely wrong way, and is never going to be fruitful. It's always going to paint you as, oh, well, you just made yourself the bad guy. They want you to be the bad guy, and now you stepped into the role, and you think, yeah, this is cool, I'm the bad guy on, multiple podcasts with these stupid, Oakley shades, and, trying to look like fucking Frozone from The Incredibles. But it's not that. And of course, time has allowed Brandon Marshall, and time and therapy, just like you mentioned, a lot of work, a lot of progress. I wish I knew the name of this dude's book, because he just released a book, and we're not in the mode of just promoting shit willy nilly, but, shout out to him for writing a book. But basically, time has allowed him to move past a lot of those barriers that he was having, and hopefully AB can get there in the future. But like you mentioned, Tunde, he has to acknowledge that, like, yo, this is an issue for me. Otherwise, we all just get to take it as is, right?
Yep. Yeah, I would like to
100% agree with that.
Go ahead, Justin.
No, I was just gonna say I 100% agree with that. Like, same thing that Brandon Marshall was saying. Like, I don't fault AB for feeling the way he felt in that situation. Again, you can Google everything that happened, but as a self-respecting adult, I think you need to be able to acknowledge like where your shortcomings are. If you need help, like being able to have the wherewithal to sit back and understand that somebody's trying to give you sound advice. Like, hey, I've seen this. I understand where you are. You need help. Because I would say overall, anybody would say that we disagree with the way that he handled the situation. The way you felt, sure. I don't disagree with that. I can understand how you felt. It's fair to feel that way in that situation, emotionally. But even after the fact, if people are trying to like give you sound advice and you're constantly rejecting every single thing and basically, no, I'm fine. It's like, at some point you have to accept, like, maybe if you're the common denominator, maybe you are the problem. So, that's all. I just wanted to touch on that quickly.
Yeah. If he doesn't sort of accept that mental health is a factor in what's going on in his life, then I think we also have to accept that. And frankly, I agree with you. Self-respecting adult is the perfect, sort of way to contextualize what happened with AB. At that point, he's just an asshole, in my opinion. But I will say that I tend to roll my eyes when the mental health conversation pops up in particularly sports. With Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka and Ben Simmons, there's been some conversations and things popping up. But one thing that I always am kind of upset with is like, if someone has an injury, they go and get the injury taken care of, and nobody talks about them ever again until they come back. Like I've been thinking about Paul George when he broke his leg practicing for USA basketball. Bruh, that dude left, and then next thing you know, he's like third in MVP award with OKC. And I'm like, didn't this dude have an injury? But he went in and he got it healed. And that's how it should be for mental health. Like with Simone Biles, she says that she has to take a break. Whatever. I'm not a gymnast. I'm not an Olympian. Do what you got to do. Next thing you know, we have this like week-long mental health conversation. I'm like, why don't y'all just let her go and heal? If someone is injured, they go and heal, and we don't sort of like turn it into a cultural movement. I mean, I don't know the details too much, but supposedly she had the twisties. That's a cognitive issue, you know? That's obviously something that could be very impactful to your life, but that doesn't mean she has depression. That doesn't mean she has anxiety. We don't know that. And the conversation was like, you know, good job for Simone Biles, like making mental health, blah, 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 blah. I mean, mental health is a much more complicated issue than Simone Biles taking a break from the freaking USA Olympics. You know, I mean, the fact that she's capable of taking a break from the Olympics, that, you know, shows how much mental health she probably doesn't have, actually, you know, mental health problems, because she's capable of performing at such a high level. And people with mental illness, people with long-term mental health problems, you know, they struggle with performing at their highest level sometimes, you know. Anyway, one last thing about Ben Simmons. You know, I don't know the story again. I'm not an insider. I'm not Adam Schefter. But, you know, I've heard some things that perhaps, you know, mental health, he's claiming mental health problems have sort of impeded his ability to play basketball. And I'm like, again, another thing about popularizing individual people's mental health and using that as a sort of cultural talking point. Is Ben Simmons truly prepared to be considered to have a mental health problem? You know, I recognize that mental health is something that everyone deals with, but to be officially diagnosed with a mental health problem is not pretty and it's not cute. So again, I don't know what the Ben Simmons situation is, but that's another thing you have to contend with that no one is talking about. Like, is he prepared to deal with the stigma of having a mental health problem? I don't think so, because it's very serious, it's very real, and it's very difficult for a lot of people. Anyway, had to go on my rant. Sorry, not sorry.
Honestly, I'm glad that you brought it up, because, you know, it's one of those things, like I haven't spoken about it outside of just like private conversations in general, but like you do see like this huge influx of athletes. It almost feels like it's like a pop culture movement or something, where it's like, oh, you know, I'm saying that I had mental health issues. I want to take a break. Am I going to disqualify like their opinion? No, I'm not a mental health professional. Like it's not for me to discern like what their rationale was for doing that. But I'm afraid of the culture that it can create if people just broadly keep saying like, oh, I'm taking a break for mental health, because then it's like a lot of people might just interpret that as, oh, I was having a tough day. And it's like, life can be tough. So I think it's important that people are truly educated on like, where do you draw that line? And not that people are just looking for, oh, I had a hard day, I need to take a break. It's like, everybody's going to have hard days. And like, that's my biggest fear when I see what happened with Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, Ben Simmons, some of the others that you mentioned, because I think that can be misinterpreted a lot of different ways, because somebody who only has 15 seconds to ingest something that they saw coming across the news, they might internalize that very differently if they don't have a true, genuine understanding of like what the situation is. And I think culturally that can be very, very dangerous for people just going forward. And the next thing you know, you're like trivializing somebody who is truly having a genuine plight, versus like you just deciding that, oh, you know, shit, Monday was tough.
But I mean, that's the issue with how we have started to recognize that mental health is even a thing in general. You know, you can very easily see and identify, oh, this person's arm is broken, he cannot play today, or what have you. When someone tells you, oh, well, however they describe it, because I don't know, like, again, just as you said, you need a mental health professional to, assess and confirm and make a diagnosis of whatever. But people can't see that. And I don't know that there's a timeline for you to get healthy from that. Today you're mentioning like, oh, well, yeah, somebody is allowed to kind of, refresh. Okay. So what's the timeline for you if you had, childhood trauma and now that is, resurfacing because you're a gymnast and you're getting the twisties or whatever it is. Sorry that's the example. I don't mean to put that on Simone Biles, but like whatever it is, there's no timeline for healing in that. And I don't know how I just don't know how you equate it. So that is where I see the barrier and difference between, how we're treating physical ailments, which is what we want to do. That's why it becomes a news thing. We want to know for betting purposes and all kind of other, sports reasons. All right, is Tom Brady's finger on his throwing hand hurt today, or is it not? Not so much, okay, is he sad because, for example, when Brett Favre's dad passed away and he went out that night and turned up on the field, like, okay, well, did he turn up because they had a great relationship? Did he turn up because they didn't have a great relationship and he just blocked it out? Like, there's no good way to put an assessment on that. But now we have the legend of, oh man, he did that one time. And now we assume, or not necessarily assume, but we hope and aspire to, okay, the next time something traumatic happens to somebody and they still go out there and play, we're going to put them on a pedestal and try to think about it like this and phrase it like this, even though we have no idea what's going on. As viewers, at least, we have no idea what's going on in that person's mind.
Indeed. Yeah, appreciate you guys indulging with me on that conversation. You guys made some great points. But just one more thing, the one person I didn't talk about earlier was Naomi Osaka. Again, my primary issue is that, I do think that we should have more mental health talk, and mental health is becoming more important, I think, just nationwide, globally, which is great. But I think that talking about people's individual mental health, particularly on a national stage, is, again, Justin, I think you hit it on the head, man. It's like people will internalize that in many different ways. People are not going to necessarily internalize an ankle injury, but if we're talking about, oh, Simone Biles had this and this and this and this, and these are things that we all experience. We sometimes think weird things, or we feel uncomfortable, or whatever. We are tired or stressed. Like these are all things that we feel. So when we sort of place, our subconscious fluctuations upon another person, and also propagated by the powerful and just massive gargantuan media system, it sort of gets out of hand. And again, AB is a perfect example. I mean, come on, the amount of mental health conversation that happened after that situation, and this man rejects it completely. And it's definitely not up to anyone else to say if he has a mental health problem except him and his doctor. But real quick about Naomi Osaka, the one thing that I've noticed with very high level athletes is, and specifically with her situation, is like, maybe it's the sport that's causing your mental health problems, which is problematic because then you can't do the sport. And I don't know what her competition has been like, what she's been doing, but I'm sure she's come back, but Michael Phelps released a documentary on HBO a couple years ago. I can't remember the name of it. I'll link it in the show notes, about how just like unbelievably difficult mentally it is to be an Olympian, a high level Olympian, so that's another conversation, is like being a professional athlete is not supposed to be mentally healthy. The people who do sort of succeed and they maintain their mental capacities, I mean, I got huge respect for them, and that's the majority of athletes. But first of all, there's a lot of stuff that's being unspoken. So Michael Phelps documentary exposes a little bit of that. But then secondly, again, with Naomi Osaka, I mean, how many people are being drilled about their performance in their job 5 minutes after doing the performance, and also very exasperated from physical activity, and you're also number one in the world at what you do. Like that, you're not supposed to be mentally healthy doing that. If you're just a regular person, as a professional athlete, they develop the ability to maintain and sort of deal with all of these insults from the media and their job that we don't have to. But again, it's like maybe we should start talking about how the fact that being a professional athlete is not exactly mentally healthy sort of profession. And
big facts, yes.
And not just professional. Like, I mean, we knew people, you probably knew hella people, Justin, at Kentucky who were athletes, and they were struggling. They had to sacrifice a lot in order to do their collegiate athletes, much less professional. So anyway, last mental health ramble. Unless some more shit comes up, I can go all day.
Yo, now I'm straight. Justin, you got any other thoughts before we continue?
I'll save it. I'll save it for the sake of this podcast. But yes, okay. I mean,
that means we got to do round 2.
Take this offline. Yeah.
We got to do round 2 with the travel expert coming up soon. You heard it here first. Hashtag RTBTH, which interestingly were the last things I said in my best man speech. Hashtag RTBTH. And then I dropped the mic, but I didn't drop the mic. But I wanted to.
Nah, man. Yeah, that shit was dope. So the next thing, all right, that was great. First off, that was very illuminating for me as well. Anytime, Tune, you could provide some insight into the mental health space, we, the listeners, myself included, in that, definitely love it. So that's what's up.
Yes, sir.
The next thing that's like the biggest shit that just happened. This shit is so crazy. I cannot believe it. There are literally like so many different angles to this particular story. I know y'all done heard about this shit in the news. Even Tom Brady's fucking retirement was marred by this particular news. And it's not even news that we didn't already know, right? And it does deal in two of some of, I don't know if I should say they're both my favorite things. One of these things is my favorite thing, but I get so much entertainment from two of these things, and that is being black and the NFL. And we are going to get into this whole fucking class action lawsuit with Brian Flores suing not only the Miami Dolphins, who just fired him after he was arguably a very successful, relatively successful coach. I'm not going to say very successful. Also suing the goddamn Giants, who did not hire him, and all the nonsense and behind the scenes shit behind that. The Belichick angle of that particular lawsuit with the team. The Denver Broncos, who are also named in the lawsuit, and then a whole other lawsuit against all 32 teams as a whole. My man is coming for everybody's neck, not necessarily thinking that they are going to, do anything about this, because, I mean, we all saw what happened to Kaepernick. They settled because they didn't want to get deposed. Nobody wanted any kind of discovery, no shit like that. But I am really excited, one, for the bag they're about to throw at Brian Flores, and two, if there is information that comes out, because, I mean, let's be real, John Gruden also just got fired a couple of months ago.
And also filed a lawsuit against the NFL.
Niggas are suing NFL left and right. Can we come up with a lawsuit? I know we trying to sue Emory for fucking with our student loans and whatnot. I hope our listeners saw that class action lawsuit against all these Ivy Leagues and shit. Keep y'all's paper right, man. I'm all about a class action lawsuit. But this one in particular is just so bananas. The NFL writers, this season of the NFL, the screenwriters, they are not playing games. Not only have the particularly that divisional round, those games been fire, but like the controversy,
Yep.
Guys, I didn't know it was going to get better than the pandemic season, which already is an asterisk season. Like that shit didn't happen in 2020. Like wasn't no champion. Tom Brady only has 6 rings. I don't know how many he actually has or whatever. Maybe he hears this podcast and comes back, but fuck him. I don't care. But this news, so we can start with the Belichick news, right? Which is basically like kind of the cherry on top that Brian Flores and his team of lawyers used, to basically kick all of this off, basically to get eyeballs. This wasn't even the real lawsuit portion, but essentially for our listeners, Bill Belichick, one of the, head coaches that Brian Flores as a defensive coordinator worked under, accidentally texted the wrong Brian to congratulate him for getting a job that he did not get. Now, of course, with the NFL, they have rules in place to not be racist because that's how racist they are, that they got to have not be racist rules. And then they still put end hate and stop racism and stupid shit on all the helmets and in the end zones. And God damn it, NFL. But anyway, basically, Bill Belichick texted the wrong Brian Flores, confirming for Brian Flores that he got a job that he didn't actually get. Bill Belichick meant to text Brian Daboll, who had already previously interviewed for this position and allegedly got it. Per Bill Belichick, Brian Flores had not even yet interviewed for the position. So now we got screenshots. Like it's always bad when screenshots are involved. It's never some good shit that's going to come out of it.
That's real as
and
fuck.
There's always going to be more. There's always going to be more information. So I just like want to first think about, and get you guys' perspective on like, all right, Bill Belichick, who is already curmudgeonly and shit, he sees this news like, whose text messages got screenshotted? And obviously he knew of the situation. Like, credit to him, when he made the mistake, he apologized in the messages and was like, oh, fuck, I messed up. Like, I didn't mean to. He didn't muddy it any more than it already was muddy. And there are those out here saying that he may or may not have dropped this particular bomb on purpose to, one, ruin a direct division rival of his in the Miami Dolphins, and two, other NFL teams, and then just the NFL as a whole, because fuck him, right? He don't care. They've always been getting on him for stupid shit. Well, now I got y'all
for stupid shit
coming off.
Okay, you mean for cheating?
For real shit. For cheating. You're right. My bad. I got carried away a little bit. But just as we were noting earlier, these sports have not been made to be fair. They definitely cheated us. We need to file some kind of class action lawsuit for Kyle Shanahan throwing games in the Super Bowl. I don't know. But I'm interested in you guys' thoughts on how Bill Belichick is perceiving this maelstrom of a news cycle, and then we can get into the particular teams.
Well, first point I'll say is, I think Bill Belichick's his perspective right now is either, oh fuck, or that worked out perfect. Either he's like, fuck y'all and Roger Goodell, because like, I didn't do anything. I'm basically helping my man's out. They fired him, and I'm like, oh well, if I put him in this position, sure, he's gonna be blackballed in the industry anyway. He's not gonna get another job. Let's get him a bag anyway. Let's get him a nice little going away gift. It don't blow back on me. People say, "Oh, you texted the wrong person." Oh, oops.
That
technology.
That's the most boomer shit ever, by the way.
Yep.
And I'm not trying to
boomers, bro. We've who among us has not texted the wrong person by accident?
Yeah, you're right. But it's like, the people, boomers are the ones who get exposed for like the technology shit, even though everyone does dumb technology shit. But it's like typical, boomer shit. Although I don't want to be ageist, everyone who does, regardless of their age,
for our boomer listeners.
Yeah,
appreciate you.
But I find it hilarious that it's like perfect, like, boomer troll shit. Anyway, go on.
Like
Justin.
if Sean McVay had done that, it would have been like, I don't know if I believe it's the same.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Come from Bill Belichick. Oh, it's just maybe a mistake. Guy's 60-something years old, text the wrong person, or whatever. Yeah, he's up there.
Yep.
He's up there. Him or Nick Saban could pull this off.
Yeah, a little more benefit of the doubt when we know they text with the index finger, for sure. But even beyond that, though, like, this could mean that he gets deposed. And I mean, I would love to see it. Him on the stand, just like, we're on to Cincinnati, or just bullshit. Like, because they're not going to be asking him football shit that he cares about. They're going to be, I mean, he may give like real shit, but they're all going to be like straightforward answers. Either he's going to immediately throw them under the bus, or it's going to be, I guess it could always be the same old boring Belichick interview. But I do think it's interesting that we might, in Discovery, get access to all of his private text messages the way we were supposed to with Tom Brady and John Gruden and all this other stuff. But again, only a handful of emails came out, and then all that shit got shut down very quickly. That settlement, that big ass bag, came very quickly. So outside of the discovery, or what we may discover, I'm just interested in seeing what kind of money the NFL throws to make this shit go away. But so beyond that,
and just how much resilience he has.
Oh yeah,
just to see if he's going to allow it to be something just as easy as throwing a bag at it, or if he might go as far as being a martyr for change.
Yeah,
I think there's a fine line you have to toe there. Knowing that you're going to be unemployed, but
that's true. And that's the thing, because even with Kaepernick, like, he was a martyr. He was never going to play again, but he, one, received a settlement, and two, nothing changed, right? That's the thing about what is happening right now is that, and we can get it. I want to get into the specifics with each of the teams. What the fuck happened? Because I mean, it sounds good. That's the real thing. All of this is like, yo, this is juicy ass material. This is all gossipy. Da 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 da. Somebody's heads will roll. Somebody is gonna get fired. But the institutional racism that caused the situation to break down is not going to change. And the team that I wanted to talk about here is the Miami Dolphins, who just fired Brian Flores after having one of the more successful seasons that the Dolphins have seen in recent years. They went on like a 7-game winning streak in the middle of the season. And essentially, this man, Stephen Ross, the current owner, who is allegedly one of the more progressive owners, he was kind of, on the side of players often, but not entirely. It is very much a gray area with all the Kaepernick stuff and the kneeling. But he allegedly stated that he was supportive and wouldn't be firing players. Now we are hearing not only did he just fire this relatively successful black coach after a short period of time, which has been the MO of the NFL for years and years and years now, with Hugh Jackson, who just before this podcast started up, aligned himself with Brian Flores. So that's already one other black head coach getting in there.
In terms of the class action? Like, is he joining the lawsuit?
In terms of the class action. He's going to need to present some documents, obviously. But he was on Twitter like, yo, I got receipts. What's good? What's good, NFL? Where my bag at? And again, it's a class action lawsuit. So it is going to be, more and more people stepping up. And I want to get into, what it would actually take to make change. But that'll be after I kind of break down each of these teams, right? So for the Dolphins, Stephen Ross firing his black head coach. Not only that, he also was trying to incentivize his coach to lose games, which is probably the bigger aspect of this, because we just not going to get the racism up out of here. It is what it is. All these dudes.
I mean, that's the one thing the NFL could get behind if the sport's being compromised, and like,
yeah, but that
previously with like gambling,
exactly.
Gambling now is widely accepted, interestingly, but
yes.
That would be the one angle I could see them really taking seriously, but that's been kind of like an understatement in terms of the news cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's going to be the kind of sticking point that they try to drive to. But the issue is going to be they might punish Stephen Ross, get that owner up out of here, or tax them draft picks and fines and shit like that. But it doesn't change the issue where Brian Flores is choosing to die on his sword of not having opportunities for black coaches, right? It's window dressing, or it's like plate dressing that's actually ham. It's actually like the real meat and potatoes of whatever that's like that might get some change done, but it isn't necessarily like the change that we really want to get into. So that aspect is interesting. And the Dolphins have been kind of a tire fire since, I guess, Dan Marino, whatnot, up and down. And even throughout this season, there had been a lot of rumors about Brian Flores potentially wanting a different quarterback than their first round draft pick, Tua Tagovailoa, instead for the fucking notorious Deshaun Watson. So like, even there are all kinds of like murkiness within the waters, to the point where even Stephen Ross is out here manipulating, not only with the incentive to lose thing, but the other story is that he was trying to set up Brian Flores in tampering with another potential quarterback on one of his super yachts or some shit, and tried to set up a meeting. And Brian Flores was like, nope, this is probably a bad idea, and leaves before it actually takes place. So at least he's honorable there, right? Now we have, because of reporting, identified that quarterback was Tom fucking Brady, which is like pretty fucking huge, right? Not only that, with Stephen Ross firing Brian Flores, they immediately, I don't know if you guys noticed it, but they immediately went on a smear campaign after everyone questioned, like, yo, why'd you fire this seemingly competent black head coach? What the fuck is going on here? Immediately, we see the campaign of, yeah, he had anger issues and he was mean to the players and all the shit that we, particularly as black men excelling in our fields, when, we choose to use our voices here. I mean, I've heard it before. I don't know about you guys in, whatever meetings and offices, but like, you get too adamant about a particular point and they will label you, and you might as well move on to the next. So what do you guys think, particularly about this clusterfuck that the Dolphins have going on? I think I hit all the points, but I don't know.
I'm glad that it's at a point where we are talking about it. Am I surprised? No. It definitely seems like, just from the different things that we've heard, that they were trying to coerce him to doing something so that they could catch him on something. Like, he wasn't the guy. I mean, I think if you didn't like the guy, I think you should just like own up and say that. But of course, I mean, you're talking about like really wealthy people who have gotten into these positions for, however they managed to get there. But their perspective is that they're like above the law, that they make the laws. The laws are not meant for them. They're meant to govern everybody else that is subjugated, that they perceive as subjugated to them. So I think that this is something that, it's good that the conversation is happening. I hope that there will be, some real change that comes from it. Particularly, I know when we get into like this, the Giant side. So like, I definitely want to slow down just so we can kind of get into that, because I think that's like even the more juicy topic outside of this BS that Stephen Ross has been caught red-handed doing. I'm sure other owners have done it in the past. I'm like, he ain't the first and he won't be the last.
I guess the one takeaway
Let's get into that Giants talk.
Yeah, the one takeaway I would say about the Dolphins is like owners ain't shit, really. I mean, Jerry Jones has been sort of excoriated for having too much control on his team, and a lot of people believe if he just sort of fell back a little bit, the team could be more successful. Fuck it, owners gonna do what they do, and Stephen Ross is one of them. Real quick about the Giants. I mean, there's a lot to say, but I'll just say this. I was watching Colin Cowherd earlier. He's on Fox Sports 1, and he sort of broke down like all the coaches that the Giants have hired in the past couple years. Like they've been through like 3 or 4 since Tom Coughlin, and they've all basically been first-time head coaches. Joe Judge was like a special teams coach or like not even a coordinator or something, so it's like, I can't even really respect your hiring decisions, Giants. So, the sham interview that they gave to Brian Flores, I mean, that's one thing. But on the other thing, like, if there's this, racist issue or racism issue or discrimination issue, that's one thing. But then on the other hand, it's like, don't y'all want to win? Don't y'all want to like, be a good team? And I would say, generally speaking, if you've not succeeded, maybe try someone who's actually been a head coach. But anyway, I'll let you. And
somebody who was winning. Like, he legitimately was winning. So to say that he was, bad at his job, like, that's just not true. Like, he was showing progress. Like, it wasn't like he was just, below 500 every single year. I mean, this is a guy who was like showing a track record of like turning his program around and like actually winning.
Yeah, definitely overachieving. But, as we get into the Giants talk, I think it's much more than the fact that, let's assume not only do they want to win, but they just want to like present good products, right? I think what we run into in this whole coaching, hiring process and situation is they don't know what the fuck they're looking at. Most of the time, I think there is a lot of shooting around in the dark and trying to, just time out when we can get draft picks and things like that. But one of the issues is when black coaches are being hired, it seems like they're rolling the dice on like some cheaper option. You're not a serious candidate for when we're actually trying to win, to keep your job, to be some prominent, hero to the game or whatever the fuck. You're just a stopgap. Like we hire, for example, and we'll get into it with the Broncos, who have recently fired a black coach in Vance Joseph, and then hired a similarly incompetent to all these other white coaches in Vic Fangio. They hired that dude on for 2 years and then got out of here. And he didn't do really that bad. But it just seemed like, oh, well, we're just going to try to restructure. I would imagine, as I kind of think this through, the Saints, who are in cap hell right now, are going to have some issues. They might try a PR move of, oh, yeah, we're going to hire a black coach, even though there's no fucking way racist ass, whatever that lady's name, Benson, she's rich and like 90 years old and, whatever, is going to hire a black coach for the long term. They're definitely going to go right on back to, Joe Schmo, whoever they can get, some ex-player, which is generally what it is. And for black coaches, the pipeline is just non-existent. You, one, have to be a prior player, and two, you have to be so good as a player that we kind of remember you as something important, or someone has to kind of drag you along to show, oh, not only can you do this on your own, or you are Eric Bieniemy with all-star offenses year after year that, is a proven product. No. We need you to make sure you check every single box. And if you have even an instance where you step out of line, we're going to somebody else. That's the institutional racism that not only the Giants are showing, not only the Broncos are showing, the Dolphins have just shown. And that's what I don't think will ever improve. I don't know the other alternative, because just like our conversation with the UFC, they're the only game in town. Sure, the USFL and XFL or whatever, Canadian football is trying to get their shit off the ground, but this is A1 right here. This is where you want to be, and it's just so weird that you would have it. So in the lawsuit, Brian Flores and his lawyers include a term describing it as plantation mentality, right? Where Black people that are in the organization can be labor, but they are not allowed to be management or are rarely trusted to be management. And that is going to be a very, very difficult thing to prove. Meanwhile, it's absolutely true, and we can all see it. It's the same thing with the NCAA. It's America. That's the real thing. It's the American structure. And we try to be equitable in different places in different ways, and do what we can. And we thought Obama was going to kind of change that around, but nah, we can clearly see with all the other political alignments and actions and shit that this is America. I hate it, but it is what it is.
Don't catch you slipping up.
Yeah. Black man, get your money. All the lyrics to that song, that man, Childish Gambino, Donald Glover, shout out to you. Definitely. Yeah. He knew what time it was, knows what time it is. All these things. I mean, the music industry, record labels, all that. Like, we get it. We understand that. And I absolutely appreciate Brian Flores for trying to be, an agent of chaos, an agent of change. Hopefully he has the gumption to kind of stick this out for the long run, because they're going to drag his ass through the mud. I hope he doesn't have too many, skeletons in his closet, because they come in for all that shit. They did it to Martin. They're going to do it to you, brother. I'm sorry. But otherwise, I love it. Other thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I mean,
have y'all ever been to any sham interviews?
Honestly, there was one that I went to that it was done really weird, and they didn't even get back to me. And then I kind of followed up, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we hired someone else." And I was like, "Was this just a quota thing?" I legitimately had those thoughts, and I was very upset, and that's kind of what I was thinking, but I couldn't. I mean, obviously, couldn't prove it, but yeah, perhaps I have had a sham interview, Herschel. Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting situation. I think it's impactful. I sort of shy away from, or maybe I don't have very much faith in our justice system, sort of delineating race or racism as a sort of infraction on people's rights or privileges in certain work industries or employment situations. It's I think racism probably is the best word to describe the disparity, but you want to take that to a court of law, and I don't necessarily have faith in that. But we'll see. I think it's good overall. I would say, along with Kaepernick and other cultural things, this stuff is starting to add up, and the NFL is only so powerful. I don't know how much they can sort of hold off. And this is not even to say that the NFL has the power to sort of dictate, cultural sort of fluctuations, but it's becoming to a point where it's just from a media and PR perspective, it's unbearable. I mean, we had 2 years of Kaepernick and kneeling, and that was just a shitstorm of, for the NFL and the teams, and, and then George Floyd just erupted, this stuff again. And I don't think that it's sustainable for society. Societal change is a whole different thing, but for an industry and for a business, I mean, yeah, the pressure is on. I don't necessarily think a lawsuit is how it's going to necessarily shift, but this lawsuit is very telling of some major shit happening culturally, societally, and, in the NFL. But this is one thing I'll say. This is kind of my overall take on this is we definitely in America have to get rid of this idea that merit is how people get hired for things. This situation with Harvard and their admissions policies has been coming up in the news a bit. I think the Supreme Court is supposed to rule on it this summer or some shit. And I've just been reading a few articles. Supposedly, 43% of white admissions at Harvard are either legacy athletes, donors, and there's a last category. Or their parent works at Harvard. So it's like, I read an article. Some percentage of them getting into Harvard is like, because of those factors. And then like 16% of like minority people have that qualifier. I don't know. I'm probably butchering these numbers, but long story short, like, this idea that people get to where they get to because of merit is completely ridiculous. And I mean, the NFL is, like Herschel, you said it perfectly. You don't know what the heck you're looking for in a head coach. What the heck does, especially in the NFL, what are you looking for in a head coach? So people just hire people that they hear about through their circles and their networks. And because of the just horrific background of our country where, not only did we have segregation and not only did we have like, laws and systems to subjugate a whole class of people, a whole race of people, we had actual slavery, so black people and people of color have been sort of always relegated to this second class or this sort of subordinate group of people. And so if you're talking about the only way you can get a job or advance, which I think there's a little bit more meritocracy just in general, but definitely not very much in the NFL or professional leagues. So if you are getting jobs based on who you know, who your circle, your networks, sort of small preferences and biases, I mean, of course, black people are not going to get jobs when historically, their place in society has been subjugated, secondary.
Even tackling to that same point, I mean, you're right. It's not a meritocracy. If you think about the nepotism that's inherently involved, I mean, Sean McVay, what is he, 36? At 31, he was like the youngest head coach in the NFL. His grandfather was also a GM for the 49ers. Like, these things don't just happen. There are plenty of other people that could have been on his same trajectory, but they would have never gotten the same opportunity. But I'm not going to say that, yes, I will agree that you can title that as racist, but in any scenario, like if you're working a job, if you're hiring somebody, you're going to hire somebody that you're comfortable with because you're hiring them to do the job that you want them to do ultimately. And you're going to be working with them. So I'm not going to say that it's flawed. I think fundamentally the flaw is something that you also touched on, is that the separation of like social circles in general, like that wealth gap. If you look at the social economics of it, that's what's going to put certain people into certain categories. Because who are you hanging out with the most? Who would you want to spend your time with the most? Who would you want to work with the most? Who are you going to want to give the opportunity to? So it's like you have to have these affirmative action like things and like the Rooney Rule and stuff like that to even try to like level the playing field to make it where it's more based off of merit. But if you take that away, if I just have my Saturday afternoon, who am I going to choose to spend it with? It's probably going to be somebody that I know and that I like. And I'm not trying to, minimize the point that we're making. I think that in order to affect change, these are conversations that need to happen. And these are the types of things that need to be pushed upon. But I also don't want I don't want people to just ingest this and think, oh, the world is just not fair. It's like, okay, and life isn't fair. I think that in order for you to inspire change, you need to be able to push through that glass ceiling. So, I mean, also kind of like even touching back on like the Broncos angle, just briefly, I know that one thing that would have been really inspiring to me is if Robert Smith is actually considered in the running to actually become a majority owner of the Denver Broncos. Like him being a billionaire black investor from Denver. I didn't even know he was from Denver, but he's done like a lot of phenomenal things.
I thought they said the Mannings were going to buy the Broncos. Yeah, because that is the crazy.
No, I'm just saying like if Yeah, like just him being in a position, had he been, I guess, considered strongly where he could actually, acquire the majority share of the Denver Broncos. To me, that would have been something super interesting to see. But it seems like the NFL is just not, they're still not ready for something like that. Because I even think at some point, Warrick Dunn is or was a minority owner of the Atlanta Falcons, but it was like less than 10% or something like that. But
Yep.
in terms of finding like a majority owner in the NFL that's black, I mean, you'll never see it. I mean, Shad Khan is, I guess, what is he, Pakistani English or something? He's the only non-white owner in the NFL, I think.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
That's correct.
And I think there's a woman owner, and everyone else is a white man.
There are a couple of women, and then there are families. There's like the Maras, and then people's husbands have died. Yeah, the Bensons is her husband died.
The Joneses, the Jerry Joneses.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think it's just Jerry. I think he not sharing that with nobody. If he's married, that's definitely in the prenup. So I don't know.
Right.
But no, great points. Great points. All definitely agree. And it is quite the sticky situation. I'm excited to watch the shit unfold, like I mentioned. And really, I want to see how big that bag gets, because ain't no fucking way the NFL lets out all these racist emails and text messages. There's just no way. There are too many people potentially liable, where like, they're going to try to ride out the PR wave, but then it's going to be off season and we're not going to have shit to talk about. There's not going to be a new game. Honestly, they already, Brian Flores already kind of wins, because this dead air between the Super Bowl or the AFC and NFC championship games and the Super Bowl, every single day we talking about this shit. We're not talking about Tom Brady anymore. He had his little 45 minutes or whatever. We're talking about what the fuck is going on with this, and what are all the different angles, particularly as other coaches get hired. Every time a new coach gets hired, all right, but was he black though? Okay, so what happened? Who did y'all interview that was black? What happened here? Was everybody, at least for a couple months, got to tighten up? So that's going to be really interesting to watch. But yeah, I'm glad we had this talk, fellas.
Indeed. Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of a sucky situation, and I do love the NFL and I love watching football, but there's a lot of things that I really don't pay attention to. And one thing I learned was like, how few black head coaches there are. I always knew it was a small number, but one right now with Tomlin, and that shit just is like, me, Herschel, I kind of sort of am very timid with the race talk, but I mean, the freaking league is 70% black. So it's just, regardless of what you want to say about how many people should be, like what's proper representation. I mean, yeah, I just feel like, if we agree that people tend to sort of create their social circles in terms of people that are like them, I mean, it would make sense to have 70% of head coaches be black, but, or at least 50%. But Herschel, you're right though. The entertainment is just too good. NFL is a gift that keeps on giving. And I was not trying to sit through another 6.5 months of riding Tom Brady's career. Congrats to the GOAT. He's a GOAT, whatever. But I was not trying to listen to everyone basically, talk shit about Brady's career and his retirement and blah, 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 and bullshit. So thank you, Brian Flores, for changing up the news cycle. Fuck you, Tom Brady. You're basically going to be launched into the Hall of Fame, so we could do all that shit later in 5 years.
Pretty much. All right. Thanks for listening. Peace.
Yeah,
thanks guys for having me.
Yes, sir. Hashtag RTBTH. Peace again.
You heard it here first. What other hashtags? That's not.
Still looking for that sponsorship from HBO. Hit us up.
Right, facts. Y'all should watch HBO. Well, I don't know if you're recording this. I'm assuming you cut.